Hi everyone, it's Tina and welcome back to my channel. One of my top videos in 2019 was my discussion about relocating for financial gain and how my family moved from Littleton, Colorado to Missouri. And it dawned on me that while I explained pretty thoroughly what are the things that you need to consider when you're selecting a new place to move, I didn't really address the question of how do you go about the process of moving? Now, I am a military brat. My family moved frequently throughout my youth. I would say that we lived in a place for 3 to 4 years before we relocated. And as an adult, I've continued that trend. However, it would be more, I think, to the point of every 6 or 7 years. As an adult, I have moved from Montana to Minnesota, Minnesota to Colorado, and then Colorado to Missouri. So I have a lot of experience in this, and I want to take a moment to highlight some of the steps that you need to consider when you're moving cross-state. About 3 to 4 months out, you will want to start preparing and organizing what is going to get packed, what's going to stay with you, and figure out your plan for actual moving day. It's really important to know what company you're going to use, so you should be researching and hopefully booking your moving company. There are a slew of options out there for you. A quick internet search will provide you a variety of choices. In the past, I have used U-Haul for my very first move from Montana to Minnesota because I had so little stuff. It was very easy for me to load it up in a U-Haul and take it cross-country myself. When we moved from Minnesota to Colorado, we were moving from a smaller home of about 1,000 square feet. So again, we didn't have a ton of stuff. We were able to use the pods company. We took 2 pods and we were able to pretty much move everything between those 2 pod units and our vehicles. And then when we moved from Colorado to Missouri, we used ABF. ABF is actually the company that used or moved our pods as well. And that's how we were familiar with ABF. So we used ABF. We, I think, secured a 40-foot truck and we filled that up to the brim. And that's how we ended up moving a 6-room home. I recall when we moved from Colorado to Missouri, I booked, I want to say 4 months out. And I was advised that the family that was moving with us needs to hurry up and schedule theirs because there was only 2 trucks available after I had confirmed my reservation. And that was with ABF, and again, it was for Memorial Day weekend. If you're moving at a less popular time of year to move, for example, the middle of winter, probably you could book it 2 weeks out. I mean, I really wouldn't encourage that by any means, but when you are moving in the summer, especially for those of you with children, obviously this is the most popular time to move because you don't want to interrupt or disrupt your children's school year. During this time, you should also be collecting boxes and have consideration, like I said, for those things that are going to get packed up and put into the truck, as well as those things that you're going to keep with you. Also, at this time, again, about 3 to 4 months out, you should have a plan on where you're going to land. Do you have a rental property set up for you? Do you know what neighborhood you want to relocate or get situated in? If you're fortunate and you have family where you're going, then you'll probably have greater insight and possibly have a place to land, and then you can look for these things when you're there. However, if you are not that fortunate, you will need to have a place to land. So make sure that you are engaging property management sites, that if you have any friends that have feet on the ground in the place you're ending at, then ask them to walk around, ask them to help you identify what are some of the better neighborhoods. Perhaps they already have familiarity with it. We did this both when we moved to Minnesota. We had a friend that was already in Bloomington, Minnesota, who was able to give us great advice on where to get a rental, just a small apartment. And then again, when we moved to Colorado, we worked with a property management company, but my husband had some coworkers that were in that area. Since he took the job that brought us to Colorado, we asked if those folks would be willing to do a drive-by on a couple properties, which they did, and that gave us greater confidence on where we were ending up. Also during this time frame and about, pretty much from now until when you move, you should begin a household edit. You should start going through your belongings, figuring out what's going to go with you and what is not going to go with you. Those things that are not going to get relocated, find people to give them to or find a place to donate them and get a tax receipt. When we moved from Colorado to Missouri, we had a whole slew of toys that we had so many friends in our children's age group that we were able to gift those to. And then also the daycare centers that my children went to, we went to them and said, hey, we've got these, this kitchen set. Would you be interested in having that? And of course, a daycare center is always looking for an opportunity to refresh the toys to engage the children that they are taking care of. About 2 months out, we began notifying all of the important people, but most importantly, we informed our pediatrician and we informed our primary care providers. So we were making sure that we had our final physicals, we were making sure that our children had their final well visits, we were collecting any medical records that we might need from the veterinarian, from our dentist. We were making sure that if they didn't want to, didn't recommend giving us the records, that we knew who to contact and how to have our future care providers be able to reach out to them and make sure that we had access to that information. If you are moving during the school year, you absolutely need to get evidence of any vaccinations that your children had. Most school districts require those today, and they will ask for that upon registration. This was also the time that we made sure that we notified our house cleaner, our daycare providers, anyone that we had a recurring service with, that especially that is a small business. We wanted to make sure that we didn't disrupt their ability to maintain their income. So we gave them plenty of notice, at least 2 months, so that they could start marketing and looking for new clients, so that it was not too much of a disruption our leaving. It's a courtesy, and I highly encourage those of you who use such services to pay that respect. So 4 weeks out from the move, we made sure that we were notifying our utilities company, and this would be the window for informing your landlord. You will be more familiar with your lease if you are not a homeowner, so you'll know what the requirements are. Some landlords require 30 days notice, some require 60 days notice. Make sure that you're familiar with your lease and you know how much notice you need to give. I recommend doing it in writing no matter what, so that you have evidence that you notified your landlord and they don't try to stick you with an extra month's rent. Also, know if your lease has any restrictions. So for example, are you breaking lease? Did you not meet the full term of the lease? If so, you could have additional expenses that you should be prepared to take care of. 4 weeks out is also the window where you want to start notifying your utilities companies. If you are able to pre-schedule a cancellation date, I would highly encourage that. So for example, if you know that your moving day is, January 2nd, call up your utility company and let them know that effective January 2nd, you will no longer be responsible for the utilities, and let them know who will be taking that over. If you're in a rental situation, it should be the landlord, and the utility company will likely already know that. And if you are in the situation where you're selling a home, make sure that the new homeowner is aware that you have canceled the policy, or the utilities, and that they will be responsible going forward. All right, guys, about 3 weeks out, you really need to start getting tactical about the things you have in the house and your food. If you have dry goods that have never been opened, you can always donate those to a food shelf. If you have food in the freezer that you can't get rid of to a food shelf, you might want to talk to your neighbors about it. My husband and I are in the habit of buying a half cow. We've done this now for multiple years in a row. And when we relocated from Colorado to Missouri, we knew there was no way that we were going to be able to bring the amount of meat that we had with us. So we divvied it up between our neighbors, and they were really grateful because, I'll be honest, it was Wagyu beef and it was delicious. About 3 weeks out is also the time frame where you'll want to get your cars serviced, and any last medical things that you haven't already taken care of, make sure you're doing it now. Hit up that dentist, get your vision taken care of. Anything that it will be stressful for you to have to get situated in a new place, get started in your new job, or have to cope with just setting up a new household. It's best if you can get that off your plate before you go. I know it's a stressful time even now, but I promise you it'll be harder to have to find a new pediatrician right when you land in your new location, or a new medical doctor, or a new mechanic that you trust. So any of those activities that you can cover prior to moving, highly encourage that. And just know that you're taken care of for, the next 3 months, 6 months, or even 12 months, depending on what it is that you had done. All right, we're coming into the home stretch now. About 2 weeks out, you should be going to the post office and making sure that you've got your mail forwarding set up. At this point, you should already know where you're going to land. I have to be honest, I still get mail sometimes for prior residents. It's mostly junk mail at this time, but it blows my mind that they never set up mail forwarding for some things that are important. At 2 weeks out, you should be packing like a crazy person. You are packing. You are looking to get everything as organized as possible prior to the moving truck's arrival. And at this point, you may as well also hire a home cleaner. whether this is for your own home, you just want to leave it in a good condition for the new owners, or whether this is for a landlord that requires a professional cleaning, get that scheduled now, and then make sure that if it's for a rental property and you need evidence of the cleaning, that you are ensuring the home cleaner meets the landlord's expectations, and also that they're willing to give you a receipt to evidence the job that they've done. This is also the time where you'll want to book a hotel for your cross-country move. Most people will send many of their belongings through a pod or a moving truck, but you're going to want to drive your car. I mean, how else is it going to get there? If you are driving your own car, you need to figure out the route you're going to take. If it's a multi-day trip, figure out the best places to stop for hotels. I use booking.com. And I think when we moved from Littleton, Colorado to Missouri, we ended up staying overnight in Topeka, Kansas, because it was just too long for the kids. We broke up the trip. Had it just been my husband and I, frankly, we would have just bombed through, which is what we did on all the prior moves. If you are staying at a hotel, make sure that it's pet friendly or that you have a plan for your pets. And also any plants that you're bringing. Not that the plants need to be brought into a hotel or anything like that, but if you have some plants, you're not going to want to stick those in the moving truck, and some of them don't travel well. So if you have a plant that you don't plan to bring with, find a place to bring it. If you do have plants that you plan to bring with, make sure that you have a way to ensure that they stay at the right temperature so they don't die in transit. 1 week prior to the move, you should be pretty well ready to go. You should know what clothing and what essentials are going to travel with you in the car. You should have most of the boxes packed. You should have the cleaning people ready to roll. And at this point, you are just confirming everything. You're confirming your new place of residence. You're confirming the utility companies. You're confirming the moving company. It is the week of confirmations. Consider speaking to any of the insurance companies. Consider speaking to, if again you're moving in the school year, that the schools are aware of the transitions. You're really just, crossing those T's and dotting those I's and making sure that you're doing the double, triple check so that things can move as smoothly as possible. Another important thing that I do about a week out is I make sure that I have, again, the pet carriers ready. And since I already know the route that I'm going to take and I know the hotels I'm going to stay at, I check the weather. I start putting into my phone's weather app all of the major pit stops along the way, and I ensure that I know, what the weather is supposed to be like during the route or along the route that I'm going to take. When we moved to Missouri, we did hit some inclement weather right outside of Topeka, and it was really helpful for me to be able to say to my kids, you know what, it's rain, this is the type of weather they get here, and don't worry because we're staying in a hotel in Topeka, so we're almost there, and it really eased their anxiety about being in a new place, going through such a major transition. And I highly encourage, as you're going through this entire process, if you have children, especially young children, it's important to explain to them what you're doing, why you're doing it, when you're doing it, and making sure that they can contribute to the process. So for example, with packing, we really had our children pick out their own clothes that they wanted to bring with in the car. We had them help us choose which toys were going to be donated. We made sure that they were aware of the route we were going to take, when we were going to go. We let them pick the restaurants we did our pit stops at so that they could feel included and have some sense of control over what can be a very unsettling experience, especially for young children. All right, guys, now we are getting to moving day. So on moving day, you want to make sure that you have helped the movers get everything organized, and that you also understand what is the first leg of your trip going to be. You want to make sure that prior to leaving your home, you've made sure that the keys ended up with the people who are supposed to have them, whether that's the new homeowners or the landlord's company. Do any final checkouts and make sure that all of your devices are charged so that when you hit the road, you know that you are as set as you possibly can be. When you get to the gas station, make sure that you have filled up your tank and that your oil was changed prior. This should have been part of that week 2 or 2 weeks prior to move service check. Make sure that your vehicle is in tip-top shape before you go for that long haul trip. One of the reasons I encourage to make sure that your cell phones and devices are fully charged is obviously for entertainment, but then also to make sure that if you're caravanning with other people, you have a way to get a hold of them. When my husband and I moved from Minnesota to Colorado, we also acquired walkie-talkies. We knew that during certain legs of the trip, we would be in cell dead zones. So we ended up getting some of those high-powered walkie-talkies that people use for backcountry hiking, and we used those to communicate with one another if somebody had to take a pit stop, or if we were running low on gas, or if something felt wonky with the car, you just need to stretch your legs. I Thought this was a great idea, and I really encourage that as well. Although if you're going to do this, I would not let the kids get their hands on them. Otherwise, all sorts of mayhem can ensue with a variety of unnecessary conversations. And once you get to your final destination, make sure that you do the walkthrough of the property. Hopefully you've already seen it before. If not, you're doing a walkthrough now. You are getting the keys from your landlord. You are getting situated in your family or family friend's home. And you just take a moment to express gratitude if you are staying with someone for free, because let me tell you, that makes life so much easier. If you are in your own place, one of the first things I encourage people to do is set up internet. We are such an internet, dependent society nowadays. It is very frustrating. Unless you have a wireless or a cellular hotspot on your phone, it's very frustrating when the kids want to watch Netflix, or when you want to contact the utility company, but you got to look up the phone number. I mean, thankfully we have cell phones, but even so, being able to stream some TV before you have everything else set up, even on your tablet, is such a convenience. So internet is the number one thing that I always recommend people to get established. One thing I forgot to mention about moving day, make sure that you keep all of your really valuable items with you. So any really expensive jewelry, any heirlooms. My husband kept his firearms with him. Any important paperwork, birth certificates, marriage license, any of that medical paperwork that we had collected prior to moving. These were all things that went in the car with us. Please do not pack anything that you would be devastated if it was broken or stolen. I think that many of the companies that are doing these moving services are highly reputable, and I don't want to speak ill of anyone. I've never had an experience where something was stolen, but things get jostled. I have had things break, and luckily those were things that I wasn't as worried about, because the most precious items came with me in my car and I knew arrived safely, or if they didn't, it was my own fault and I had only myself to blame. Okay, so the last thing I want to bring up is some of the costs that came with moving. Moving is very expensive, and you can do it really cheap and you can do it really expensive. I want to say when I moved from Montana to Minnesota, knowing that I was a small single moving cross country by myself with very few belongings, it was probably only about $500, and the majority of that was the U-Haul truck and the gas to get cross country. When we moved from Minnesota to Colorado, it was more expensive. It was probably closer to about $1,500 because we used pods. We only had the 2 pods, and so the majority of it was maybe like, I want to say it was like $900 for the pods, and then the rest of it was just gas for us to get ourselves from point A to point B, which we really did in 2 days or a day and a half, but we had a pit stop in the middle with family in South Dakota, and so, I'm sorry, in Nebraska. And so we didn't have to pay for a hotel that time, and they covered our dinner that night. The process from Colorado to Missouri was more expensive. ABF was $1,500, and we did it where we packed our own boxes and loaded it up, and they simply moved us cross country. When we were in Missouri, we did hire someone to unload the truck, which I want to say was about $200. We also spent about $200 on travel food. The hotel was $200. And I want to say that just odds and ends between gas for 2 vehicles. We were pulling a trailer. We did have it loaded to the brim because we had a lot more valuables that we didn't want people to damage, or we didn't want to risk getting damage in the moving truck. That ended up costing, quite a bit of money in gas for us to get from, again, I guess this would be point B now to point C. So make sure that you have money on hand. I did not have to worry about a deposit or a first month's rent because we purchased our duplex while we were still living in Colorado. So in that way, we had a landing place that was already ours. I mean, I guess you could say that our monthly mortgage payment for the duplex was equivalent to what somebody might have to pay in rent. But again, know what your rent is and know what your first month's deposit is. Hopefully you've already gotten that taken care of prior to moving, but to me that is part of the moving expense, and you should make sure you're planning for that. An example of the odds and ends that can come up while you're moving is that when we relocated, our furniture took off, I want to say a day or 2 days before we did. So we had one night at least in Colorado with no mattresses, nothing to sleep on. So we purchased air mattresses, one for my husband and I, and then another for our children to share. We made sure that we had our camping equipment out so we didn't have to get, blankets or sleeping bags, but these type of things add up. And I'm so glad we did it because it took our furniture 6 days. And even though it only took us 2 days to arrive, that means we had 3 days in Missouri where we had no furniture. So those air mattresses were really a great thing to have on hand because outside of that and some camp chairs that we acquired when we got to Missouri, along with cleaning supplies, was really all we had until the rest of our belongings arrived. Finally, I will say that while I feel this is a great summary of what my experience was in preparing to move and some highlights from prior moving experiences, it's different for everyone, and it's always worthwhile to contact a property management company or a real estate agent, or even do a little bit of internet research yourself to find out what are some of the time frames that other people use and some of the considerations that they have, because you may very well have things that are pertinent to your life that haven't been pertinent to mine. And I want to make sure that everybody takes the time to come up with their plan and stick to a timeline so that they can have a hopefully less stressful moving experience, because the bottom line is this: moving is hard. It's hard work, it's stressful, it's disruptive. And so anything that you can do to minimize that is to your advantage so that you can walk into your new location with a great attitude and optimism. Well, guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope this is helpful to you. And as always, if this content is helpful to you, please like, comment, and share. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.